welcome one and all. It's time for another extra spicy Age of Sigmar 4th edition battle report. Stormcast Eternals in all their glory against the vile, evil, disgusting forces of the Slaves to Darkness, aka Chaos. So, this game took place a few days ago at Warhammer World, and my opponent, this is the first game of Age of Sigmar that he's played since 1st edition. So, very excellent learning experience, you would hope, and I decided I don't necessarily need to bring the filthiest Stormcasts that have been kind of running into the ground recently, the things that I think are that effective. I can try out some new units as well. So mix them in, sprinkle them in there, on top of the ice cream of the usual kind of stuff. So, let's dive in. And we're going to look at my list first of all. So, it is the Lightning Echelon. So we'll go back to the vile Chaos Forces momentarily. So in the Lightning Echelon, then you have the ability to get some extra snazzy abilities on your Extremis chamber units. So that's going to be your like Star Drakes and Dracoths and that kind of thing. We've got Kenwith. Is that Kenwith or Kenwith? As in two separate words, saying hello. Hello there. So, we have got Yndrasta, the Celestial Spear. We have a unit of 10 Vanquishers, and that is the General's Regiment. So the thinking there is that I don't want to put too much stuff in there, and I'm not that concerned if the Vanquishers get attacked and murdered horribly. So that's why they're in the General's Regiment, because even if my opponent gets loads of buffs against them, just because they're in the General's Regiment, it's fine. And there's 10 of them, so they don't just give up easy battle tactics as well, because there is one that's just slay a unit in the enemy general's regiment. So there's 10 of them, so that's going to be quite difficult to do nowadays, now that they have their 3+ save, which is nice. And Yndrasta is obviously pretty tasty with her 3d6 charge, so she's up in the sky, ready to pop down, and then 3 dice charge somebody and throw a giant spear at them. And we'll see if there's any monsters for her to get bonus damage against. Then in the next regiment, we've got the Lord Celestin on Dracoth, and 3... You can see 3 in this picture. There's supposed to be 4 concussors. However, I actually forgot my Lord Celestin, so I'm just using one of the Dracoths as the Lord Celestin on Dracoth, and then these guys are actually representing 4 models. So as soon as one of them dies, we'll be back down to the normal numbers. So, the Lord Celestin, what does he have going for him? Well, on his War Scroll, he has got, let's see what it's called, Righteous Avengers. So he can pick another Extremis Chamber Cavalry unit that has not fought yet to go immediately after him. And since they cleared up what happened with the Strike First situation in this game, meaning that if you strike first, which he may well do because I've given him the Quicksilver as one of his upgrades, so he could strike first. You can also get strike first by charging into combat as well with these units in this sub-faction. So potentially getting some strike first with this guy, the Lord Celestin on Dracoth. He can then pull another unit into attack straight after he has fought, but it's really confusing, this rule, because it feels like the intent should have been that you can't then bring them to strike first, so therefore they can't go straight after you, they have to go back to the normal sequence. So you just can't do it full stop. But the way it actually works is that he can pull them into fight straight after him as long as no one in the opposing army also has strike first. So you're pulling them into the step between strike first and strike at normal time. Which, if you're not going up against loads of strike first, it might as well just be strike first. So it's a really bizarre rules situation, and I think that could be better. I think if the intent is that you're not supposed to pull people in to fight with you when you're striking first, then it should just work that way. But alas. Then what else have we got on him? So, Lord Celestin on Dracoth, got the Quicksilver and Shock and Awe, which means that when a unit comes down from the sky with the Scions of the Storm within 12 of him, wholly within 12, that I can put -1 hit rolls against that unit for the rest of the round. The rest of the battle round, importantly, so that's good. We've got John in the chat, who it must be said, is actually my opponent for this game. So we might get some unique insight from the chat here. Then what else have we got? In the next regiment, there's just a Knight Incanter on her own, because the units she can take with her aren't very good, but I still think she is useful. She is getting deleted at some point, so I might start trying the Knight Arcanum instead. But she is good still. 140 points. She gets an auto unbind, and enemies are -1 for their manifestations. Then, in the final regiment, this is some truly experimental units in here, not sampled at all in this edition yet. So, we've got the Knight Heraldor, Harold the Heraldor. So there he is. And so he used to blow his trumpet at pieces of terrain, and they would shake and they would do damage to nearby units, and then he would die. Which was a reasonable ability if he was cheap enough, but he generally wasn't. And to get wholly within the distance required of the terrain was tricky anyway. So let's see what he does for you in this edition. So first of all, he can add 3 to rally rolls for a unit, a warrior chamber unit wholly within 12. So pretty much it's going to be your standard infantry. We've got Arav in the chat, good evening. And then in the shooting phase, he can shoot faction terrain and maybe do some mortal damage to it. Which is okay, but that's not going to be enough to destroy it on its own. And it's only 18 inches. So, he's not great, but all the Stormcast heroes have reasonable fighting profiles anyway. 3 attacks, and so you can potentially do 6 damage. So he's not terrible, but he's also not good, and his abilities aren't that significant. Because the units that you would want to give extra rally dice to probably aren't warrior chamber units. So, there you go. So he's getting a trial in this game. We've also got 5 Judicators who are off in the sky at the moment. Not tried them yet, but they look decent, and they're not horribly overpriced like they used to be either. So that's good. So we don't have any long strikes in this list, because I'm trying out different stuff. So the Judicators with Skybolt bows gets extra rend against monsters, and that is with the Shock Bolt bow, which is the fancy one that the champion has. And then the Skybolt bow has crit auto wound, a couple of shots each. And in the previous edition, the issue with them was that they were about 200 points, which was horrifically expensive for them. So they're much more reasonable right now. Then we've got 5 Retributors there, who I have been running a little bit lately, and I like them. For only 180 points, you get quite a lot of wounds in there, and they can do good damage as well, so that's good. And then we have got the Stormstrike Chariot, which has definitely taken a bit of a hit, but it is built to potentially thrive under some of the new rules, because even though its damage has been reduced, when it charges it can potentially do D3 mortal damage, if you're lucky. But the most important thing is, when it uses the Power Through command, inflict an additional D3 mortal damage on the target and add D6 to the distance this unit can move as part of that ability. And I'm going to sneeze. So I was quick on the mute button there. Okay, so powering through obviously costs a command point. So if you want to pay a command point, you can do extra mortal damage and move further with a power through with chariots. So that's really its role. And its actual fighting profile isn't particularly good. It's got a little bit of rend 2 though on the spear, but that only has 2 attacks. It does extra damage with the axe when charging, which makes it okay. And the Griff charges razor beaks. Not very good, but there's 6 of the attacks. So it's reasonable. It's 170 points, so I don't think people really rate it at the moment, so I'm going to give it a try and see how it does. Let's dive in to the vile, disgusting forces of chaos. And since we have my opponent actually in the chat, maybe he'll be able to correct me when I get all the units wrong. So there's a gigantic blob of Chaos Warriors right there. There is a unit of... Is that the Varangard there? So yeah, this is at the top. So I think we've got a Chaos Lord on Karkadrak there, and 5 Chaos Knights with the Mark of Nurgle. So they're going to be difficult to take out in combat. There's a Chaos Sorcerer down here as well. I think there's 2 of them. 1 there and 1 there. Then down here, we have got another unit of 5 Chaos Knights with the Mark of Nurgle, some Varangard, and another hero. I think this is a champion, Exalted Champion is it called? So that's that. So not a lot of units, but more than I've got on the table at the start, but some of my stuff is going to be dropping down. And the battle plan we are playing is Battle for the Pass. So this is the one where you score big points if you get onto the enemy's home objective. 2 Exalted Champions in the list. So there is no Bellicor or Archaean. So when I saw that there was no Bellicor, I was glad that I brought just some friendly experimental units rather than just going nuts into the usual kind of stuff, Krondis, Long Strikes, the stuff that is actually really good at the moment. So trying out some different units. It's my opponent's first game in this edition. But yes, Bellicor, definitely very powerful. So, you score big points if you get onto the enemy's home objective, you score a tiny amount of points for holding your own, and you score medium points for holding these 2. Other than that, battle tactics normal, and if you're the underdog, you get extra control score on one of your units, or on your units that are contesting objectives if they're not heroes, I think, is how this one's worded. So, here we go. There's the Kronspine who could potentially be coming in. I could be summoning a Purple Sun as well. Got a couple of close-ups of the paint jobs as well. So these Chaos Warriors, since we do have John in the chat there, would you like to remind me if these Chaos Warriors have a mark? They're not chosen, are they? They're actual regular Chaos Warriors. What is their mark? So I'm going first in round 1, and I go for Seize the Centre because... Let's have a look at the wide shot again. So, I've got plenty of units that don't mind going into the middle of the table at the moment. I can't really do Reclaim the Realms. That's what I like to do in turn 1, because you can drop units down to claim that. So when you're running lots of different Stormcast units, you've got quite a high number of units in the list. I'm finding that's a good one for turn 1, if you have units that you can drop down and can still affect the game. But obviously you can't be near the enemy after, so it can't be something that you want to throw into combat that drops down. So things like the Knight Incanter would be fine, and Prosecutors I like to use for it because they can stay there for a turn and hide and then still contribute to the game with their extra long movement and charge. And teleporting units really good for it as well, but I don't have any of those. The Reclaim the Realms might be one for later when units have been cleared out, but at the moment, anything I teleport down over here is under threat of a counter charge from all these Chaos units, and same goes for up there, if I could even fit anything up there anyway. So, I'm going to put the Vanquishers in the middle, and I think I have to auto-run the Knight Heraldor into the middle as well, if I want to use those 2. So here we go. And actually decide, I'm going to auto-run these guys to make sure they get there, and then just drop down Yndrasta behind them, so within 3 of the centre. Anyone wants to attack the Vanquishers, Yndrasta could potentially countercharge them. She can fly as well, so she could fly over my own troops as long as she's got somewhere to land. And the Lord Celestant on Dracoth and the Chariot just nudge onto this objective. So if the Chaos Knights want to attack me, I've got Quicksilver, so I'd be able to maybe kill a couple before they strike, perhaps, with the Lord Celestant. And I haven't brought anyone else down yet, because there isn't really a great place to land. I don't want to spend too long fighting all this chaos. So I'm staying up there, especially because there could be an enemy double coming up, you never know. So I don't want, like, my Judicators, for instance, down on the table to then get charged. So I score, but I'm not holding too many objectives, holding this one for 1 and this side 1 for 2. So the only way you actually score maximum in a turn in this battle plan is if you hold the enemy's home objective. So there is some incentive to go for that. And okay, so my opponent goes for attack on 2 fronts. So that means take 2 objectives, one of them has to be taken from the enemy. So what is required for that? Take this one, that'll be easy. And then presumably this one has to be taken off the Lord Celestant and the Chariot, which these knights could do, but they could get countercharged by me, so it would be a risk to just go in and sit there. So let's see how this is approached. They have the Mark of Nurgle, by the way, on the Chaos Warriors as well, so they're all going to be difficult to hurt in combat. So here we go, attack on 2 fronts. We've got the Cron Spine. Plop down into the middle of the table. Oh, well, technically the middle would be here, so slightly away from the middle, but the Sorcerer couldn't actually plant it that close to me because of the range of the manifestation. And also, these 2 buildings are places of power, it should be pointed out as well, so if you see the wizards hanging out next to those buildings for the whole game, that would be why. The Chaos Lord on Karkadrak, not looking too friendly, but he gets onto an objective. And the Chaos Knights, I think... yeah, so they get onto this objective, and I decide I'm going to redeploy the chariot away. Because I don't want the chariot to get hit, because it'll just get killed. And because I would potentially use my Quicksilver to strike first with the Lord Celestant, the rest of them would then think, well, the chariot hasn't struck yet, so let's punch that to death. And it can't do much if it doesn't charge. So I'm pulling that back. The Varangard in the middle have charged into the Vanquishers, and I'm not counter-charging with the Indrasta. I think I might have used up all my command points by now, so it was calculated choice to not throw her in. She wouldn't be able to strike first anyway, even if she did, so they might just kill her. So down here you can see that the Chaos Knights do get into the Lord Celestant, and up here I've put all out defense on the Vanquishers, see if I can keep them alive, and some of them get killed, obviously, but not all of them, and then I do some wounds to the Varangard in return as well. And then you can see that a couple of wounds have been put onto the Lord Celestant on Dracoth. But they're not dragging the chariot into combat because they didn't want to fight it at the same time, which means that if I get the next turn, the chariot will be able to charge them very easily, which is good news. More Vanquishers die because the Varangard choose to activate their once per game fight twice ability, which is very potent. And they don't quite kill off the unit though, which is probably not the worst, because if you do kill off the entire unit of Vanquishers, another unit of 5 could pop up anywhere on the table. So whenever you've got units that can come back to life, maybe you want to try and leave 1 or 2 alive, if the option is there. So that's going to be the end of the round. My opponent has clearly taken more objectives than I have, so that's going to be 9 points, and I'm going to be the underdog going into round 2. So, what's all this then? So I got the first crack at the second round, and I go for take their land. So you can see that Yndrasta and the Vanquishers killed off the Varangard. The Chariot and the Lord Celestant are duking out with the Chaos Knights at this point. And I think the enemy land that I'm taking is this one down here. So I've dropped in the 4 Concussors, although technically just 3 here because I forgot my Lord Celestant, so one of them is filling in as him right now. And 5 Retributors, so I'm holding these woods with them. I'm also going to be trying to make charges because I think 5 Retributors would do well against 1 Chaos Exalted Champion. Both units here actually fail their charges though, so they're just going to sit there and do the battle tactic. Yndrasta does a good job on the Varangard though. A very good job indeed, so she is powerful. And after the fighting is finished here and the chariot has piled in, then I'm able to take this objective back and kill most of the Chaos Knights over here. They are tough to chew through though, because that -1 to wound is quite tricky. So, you can see that I've left the Knight Heraldor and the Knight Incantor and my Judicators who popped down there to shoot up the Varangard before I charged in with the Yndrasta. So they've all contributed. And I'm going to score 7 points again, which I'm quite happy with at this stage. I don't want to overexpand and stretch myself too thin right now. So I've got a nice solid line here, with some powerful units sprinkled all the way down. So, what are the big threats? Cronspine could tie something up. Chaos Lord and Karkadrak is good. Varangard, and I think there's some Chaos Knights up there as well. I think they're Chaos Knights, not Varangard. So those are the Chaos Knights. Varangard are dead. So they're tough. He's tough. Cronspine is tough. Obviously a massive block of 20 Chaos Warriors is tough. All the casters are staying quite far away. And I'm in a position with the Retributors and the Concussors to maybe start striking at the enemy's home objective at some point, which is good and handy for me. But of course the enemy have a couple of units heading over towards mine as well. So, into the next turn for Chaos. And take their land is chosen. And it's going to be this forest, which is technically in my land, so it's going to be very easy for the Chaos Knights to take. But I wasn't too disappointed when I saw that, because that got me thinking, actually, the Chaos Knights might not charge anybody this turn because they're going to be guarding the woods. So I'm quite happy about that. So I think all armies need a couple of units that can potentially just sit on a piece of terrain to take it without damaging your game plan. So for Chaos, what could you take? You could take Chaos Furies, you could take small units of something that are cheaper. Some kind of Marauders, I assume you can take, whatever they're called now. So I rally back some of the Vanquishers, which is nice. And the Kronspine is heading down here, giving itself the choice of where it wants to charge. And the Chaos Warriors are going towards the Retributors. That's a fight I don't want to get into, because I would not win that fight with only 5 of them. The Lord on Karkadrak is going for the Knight Heraldor, Harold the Heraldor. The Retributors redeploy away, because I would rather not fight that unit at all. The Kronspine makes it into the Concussors. Oh no. Yeah, it makes it into the Concussors, and the Retributors are successfully charged by the Chaos Warriors. So, successful charge rolls there. But the Kronspine gets killed, because I countercharge. Do I? No, I don't think I needed to. So the Concussors just kill it. And the Retributors and the Chaos Warriors get into a bit of a brawl as well. The Lord on Karkadrak fails to charge anybody this turn, which is good for me. And that's the turn, so 7 points, so I'm still behind going into round 3, so I'm still the underdog. Battle Tactic was scored up here, but the Chaos Warriors, I think the Retributors actually did more damage than they did. I've not lost any models in the unit yet. We've got Gemmel in the chat. Good evening. So going into round 3. Let's see. So yes, Kronspine did kill 2 of them, because there was really 4, but I only had 3 models because this guy's filling in as the Lord Celestant, who I forgot to bring with me. So 2 of them died, and then they killed the Kronspine. So that's a good trade for something you can just keep bringing back over and over. So into the next round, into round 3, and you'll notice that the Lord Celestant and the Concussors are both ploughed into the Chaos Warriors here. So let me show you where they were. Here and here. So we got to about there, charged, they got to there, charged. We're going to make mincemeat of some Chaos Warriors now, everybody. You can see wounds that have been taken on these units as well. So there's 3 remaining there and 3 remaining there. So another 3 would take out another one. Yndrasta. So she, where was she? She was here. She moves up here. And the battle tactic I chose was actually to kill the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak in combat, I think. Which is risky, but Yndrasta is going to try and kill him. However, when I get her in position, I then shoot him. And he dies. So Yndrasta throws a spear at him, the Judicators shoot him, and he just fails all his saves and dies. So I fail the battle tactic because he's dead. Which means that Yndrasta then makes a charge anyway. She makes it into the Sorcerer block at the back. So that's good. And she's got all-out defense on her because one of them was striking first against her. And I score... let's see. So yeah, I went for Slay the Tyrants, which is kill an enemy hero, but I failed that. And all-out attack on the Concussors, I think? Or it could be the Retributors. They probably would have gone first, looking at how many attacks they have. Although I'm not sure, because there's only 2 of these guys left, so I can't remember. The Knight Heraldor charges into the Chaos Knights. So let's go back and look at the reasons for this. So, my plan was to attack the Lord on Karkadrak. When I got there, I then found he was dead. So the Knight Heraldor had already started going this way. The plan was for him to charge the Chaos Knights so they couldn't countercharge Yndrasta. However, she then ended up all the way over here. But if I didn't charge them with the Knight Heraldor, it's possible they would have been able to countercharge something anyway. And I think, let's see, Yndrasta would have been there. So I think they could still potentially make a charge there. Can't remember if they have any bonuses to charge at the moment. But I was trying to shut down countercharge potential, so that's why Harold the Heraldor has charged into them. So here we go, back in the action. So he's obviously going to get killed, but he's stopping them from countercharging. And actually, let's see. Yes, they did stick out to about that point. I'm trying to think exactly what I saw as the big threat that I was trying to shut down there. Okay, this is probably it. Probably the Vanquishers. I didn't want them countercharging anybody, and also the Judicators had moved as well, so I didn't want them charging into anyone round here and getting onto my objective. So the Chariot just steams onto an objective all on its own, and I have got my Purple Sun in play as well there, but it failed its charge. Then over here we've killed more Chaos Warriors, lose another Concussor. The Night Heraldor gets horribly slaughtered, as you can imagine, and Yndrasta kills one of the Sorcerers, I think. So the enemy home objective now has a Chariot on it, on its own. Now, you may have noticed in the last round the Chaos Warriors were kind of strung out back towards the objective. That's because they wanted to stop me from just landing on the objective with a unit plopping down from the sky, which is a valid thing to think and a valid thing to counter against. But it did mean that less of them got to fight last turn, I think. And then when I killed them, still I'm able to get on there anyway with the Chariot. So I'm scoring big this round, apart from the battle tactic, which was obviously failed because I accidentally killed the Chaos Lord with shooting. Which is a good accident to have, because he's obviously a combat beast. So only 6 points. So even though I feel like the game's going well so far, I'm doing some good damage, but I'm behind on points. The Kronspine is back, and he means business this time. So let's see what he's going to do. The Chaos Exalted Champion is going to try and get stuck in alongside the Chaos Warriors here. And there he goes. He gets into the Lord Celestant, who's already taken quite a few wounds. Yndrasta countercharges in the enemy turn, and she manages to get to the shrine. The reason for that is because now when she piles in, she can get into range to punch this sorcerer. So, you don't want to be hanging out next to something that can be charged, because with the pile-in, you're going to get stabbed. John says, would have been a better game if I could roll any saves. Yes, the Karkadrak Lord, his death baffled both of us. And the Chaos Warriors aren't making too many saves either, because you can see they're down to just 3 now, but I have lost the Lord Celestant. The Retributors are still at full power though, considering they've been in this combat for multiple rounds now. They haven't been targeted every turn. And it's still looking very healthy over here. And then in... this is the Chaos turn. So the Chaos Knights charge into the Judicators on the objective. And Yndrasta, I don't think she successfully kills the wizard, which is sad. And my opponent scores 5 points for the round, and the battle tactic was slay the entourage, so pick a unit from the enemy general's regiment and kill them. I can't remember which one it was that he wanted to kill, because, let's see, it could have been Yndrasta, but I doubt it, or the Vanquishers. So how are the Vanquishers doing? So they're dead. So yeah, actually, yeah, it may have just been the battle tactic and this here. So the battle tactic was successful and holding their own objective there, because I never actually rested on it. So the Lord on Karkadrak held it. I went over there and then immediately charged off it, so I didn't hold it at the end of a turn. So this one is still in Chaos hands. And my opponent, by the way, has forgotten to desecrate any of the objectives, like leave the tainted Chaos Unholy Water there to salt the earth. So yes, that's something that my opponent forgot, which was pointed out to me later. So the Kronspine came towards the Chariot, who is quite eager to run away from the Kronspine. Don't want to get hit by that. And combat rages on over here, but the Retributors are doing really well. 180 points, and you've got 15 wounds on a 3-up save that can do mortal damage in combat. So I think that's really good value. And when they inevitably get deleted, if they don't bring new models for them, then I can just use them as Annihilators or something else. We'll see, because even if you don't think Annihilators are good now, they might be in the next update. There might be something in the next General's Handbook, for instance, that makes them amazing for a season. Or they might have a drastic points reduction. You never know. So still one Chaos Warrior alive in that unit. Crit Mortals is amazing. So the Concussors and the Retributors both have crit mortals in combat, which is really good because you don't have as much access to mortals in the game anymore. you don't really have any... Well, you have very little shooting-wise. You don't have much. And from Stormcast, I'm trying to think who has shooting mortals. You only have the... You have the Knight Venator, who people think is overpriced. I think he's quite cool, but he's really good at doing something that the rest of the army is also good at, which is killing monsters. So maybe he's not necessary in that role. Maybe it would be better if his once per game shot did something different, and then maybe it would be worth it. And the Purple Sun is in combat, which is nice, reducing the saves of those Nurgly Chaos Knights as they're trying to slap the Knight Incanter and the Judicators on the objective. And a nice upside down picture there. So my opponent actually took the double there and only scored 1 point. So no battle tactic, and failed to shift these off the objectives. The Knight Incanter lived, so they couldn't all pile in down this way, which is very sad for the Forces of Chaos, but very pleasing to Sigmar. So I go for Do Not Waver. So I'm running out of battle tactics I can do easily, I think. So later on in the game, I will be looking for Reclaim the Realms, but it hasn't come up yet. I don't feel confident that I can get the units in position to do that yet. So I'm going for Do Not Waver, so no friendly units die, which is risky because the Chaos Knights are in there, but they also haven't charged. So Yndrasta and the Chariot have gone into the Kronspine, so they're going to be able to fight. I need this final Concussor to stay alive, but the Retributors should be able to kill maybe both of these, so I should be alright there. The Judicators, it's going to be a bit dicey whether they live, but I have just brought in a fresh unit of 5 Vanquishers who successfully charge into the Chaos Knights, and that's going to tip the tide, hopefully in my favour, and keep these units alive. I've all-out defensed the remaining 2 Judicators purely to try and preserve the battle tactic, and I've also put Finest Hour on the Knight Incanter this turn as well to boost her armor save, to keep her alive to prevent the battle tactic being denied. So I ended up scoring 10 points there because I don't lose any of these units, and I'm holding the enemy home objective and enough of the others. So big scores there. Into the next turn, and you can see eventually I do lose the Concussor, but the Exalted Champion is dead. There's a Chaos Warrior left though. The Purple Sun and the Judicators, who are still alive against the Chaos Knights, they're being whittled down by the Vanquishers. So the Vanquishers getting the bonuses against units of 5 or more, that feels much better than previously in Age of Sigmar. You'd see a lot of bonuses for being in like a unit of 10 or more, and then I think the Vanquishers, it used to be units of 10 or more models that they got a benefit from, and there's some units that get a benefit from hitting a unit that's got more models in than them, but just a flat 5 or more models in the enemy unit is really good, because you do see that a lot. Obviously no good against Sons of Behemat, but they've got their own problems. Okay, Chaos Knight's getting whittled down, which is what we like to see. The Purple Sun doing some good work. But the Judicators do get finished off, which is sad. So my opponent is then able to score big points in the last round for taking the objective off me with the Knights, because the Judicators were the only things holding it, because obviously the Purple Sun can't do anything about it. So 10 points after choosing Offering of Carnage. Let's see if I can read it. So slay 2 enemy units, I think. So yeah, I think the Concussor may have died this turn, and the Judicators. So yeah, that's a good scoring round for Chaos, but it doesn't really make up for especially this round here, where the double was taken, and it certainly did not pay off. So into my turn, and I go for Reclaim the Realms at this point, 'cause it's going to be easy. Yndrasta, well, I say it's going to be easy. However, what actually happens is, if we go back here, you'll see that the Knight Incanter is on 3 wounds. She needs to kill the remaining Chaos Knights with a lightning blast. And then she can move freely away and score the battle tactic. However, she horribly miscasts and blows herself up. So I now don't have units in the right position to do the battle tactic at all, so I'm just going to have to kill everything and score objective points. As you can see, the Vanquishers end up on their own. The Knight Incanter was supposed to do her thing, cast the spell, and then just dance down here, away from the enemy. So she'd be holding this section, because the Chariot can't quite reach it. So because she blew herself up, that fails the tactic. And I only score 6 in the last turn, which is just enough for a Stormcast win, but it wasn't that horribly one-sided. So pretty good close game. Obviously, the Stormcast have dominated in terms of what's alive. I'm not even sure if anything is left on the table for Chaos at all at this point. Obviously, the terrain is still there. I can't remember if there were any heroes hiding, but I think everybody's dead. So, a successful game for the Stormcast, but close on the scoring. And how do I feel about these units that were brought in experimentally that aren't that fashionable? The Judicators actually did well, and I do like them. I think their issue is, previously you would take a unit like that because you needed to take Battle Line, and they were Battle Line. As it stands now, I'm not sure that they would have a place, because long strikes are so good. That is the issue. If you're going to take a ranged unit, it's going to be the long strikes. You don't have to fill any Battle Line requirements. And I don't think the points difference between the two is enough when you consider how good the long strikes are. So, Judicators, they're definitely not a bad choice though. They're perfectly adequate. They're just competing with one of the best units. Maybe one of the best units in the game in long strikes. So it's a tough one for them, because of the role they fill, and they're now directly competing with that very powerful unit. Let's see, who else did I bring in? Yndrasta, she obviously did a good job. She stayed alive, she killed stuff, she hunted it down with her 3 dice charges. Her spear aided in killing the Karkadrak. I think that's what it's called. And she did a good job just clearing things out, killing things. She does enough damage to reliably kill little heroes. She does enough anti-monster damage to reliably kill medium monsters. She's not going to be taking out a King Brod in one turn by any means, but she would do good damage to him. So Yndrasta's good. She's a bit fragile. In this game it didn't really come up because she didn't find herself in harm's way too much, because the units that she was trying to kill and trying to go toe-to-toe with died before she got there, so we didn't get to see her survival potential. And the Lord Celestant on Dracoth with the Concussors combo. That seemed quite good. The Lord Celestant is 190 points. I think that's slightly too much for his abilities, especially since, let's see, you'd have to take the sub-faction to get the most out of him and them, which also means you're not taking the sub-faction that lets you teleport the long strikes, which some would argue is just the wrong sub-faction for that reason. But if you are running a Star Drake, would you really want the Lord Celestant and the Star Drake? I don't know. 190 points, he's not that far off just another regular Dracothian Guard unit. And he's not as good as 2 of them at fighting, I'll put it that way. He's decent though. He didn't feel particularly weak in this game. Seems alright, but again, I think for the price he's a little bit too much when you compare him to some of the other options in there. But not bad at all. The Knight Heraldor is obviously just comically bad all the time. He always will be, I think, and he's going to get deleted, so he'll probably just turn into a musician in a unit at some point. Unless they bring him back and give him fancy new rules and a new model with an even more impressive horn. It's such a weird one, the Knight Heraldor, because they invested in making 2 plastic kits for this one guy who was always garbage. Unless in 2nd edition, when I wasn't playing very much, he suddenly became amazing. Because I don't think he's ever been good. But they had 2 different sculpts for him. The first one, he was holding the horn up to his eyeball in a really weird pose. And then the second one is the one I got, which is much cooler, where he's got the horn down by his side with his sword held aloft. So it was such a strange choice that the hero who's garbage gets 2 different sculpts. And they chose to release both of them in plastic. That can't be cheap to do that. And I can't imagine everyone out there was buying multiple Knight Heraldors. There could have been a period when that was a thing, when maybe getting 2 of them or more would have been good. For a very specific period, depending on the General's Handbook rules, and his ability that used to be shake the terrain piece and then nearby enemy units take mortal wounds. So you could potentially make a list with lots of them. But I don't think I ever saw anyone doing it. I think there are probably more efficient ways to do that anyway. So he's obviously not good, but he's also very cheap, and he also unlocks some of the cool units, like Retributors. You can have them in his regiment, Judicators, and the Chariot. So the Chariot, it felt fairly survivable. It's 10 wounds for 170 points, so It's 5 less wounds than a unit of Retributors, does far less damage than them, and is only 10 points less. On the plus side, it's much faster than Retributors, and it's got a little bit of weird utility with the power through bonus that it has. But again, though, that's a command point investment if you want to do that, and it's a command point for an extra D3 mortal damage. Now, you may well say, I would spend a command point to do D3 mortal wounds to a unit, and maybe you're right to think that that's a good idea. It depends who you're fighting. So it's situational. You wouldn't really care about peeling off 3 clan rats by doing that, so that wouldn't be worth a command point. So if you're facing a unit that isn't concerned by losing a small number of models, it's not that big of a buff. So I don't think the chariot's that good, unfortunately, when you're directly comparing it to other units that are very similar points cost, like the Retributors. But it is an amazing model, though. So I would like to see it become very useful. Hopefully it comes down in points a bit if they're not going to change the rules. They usually don't mess with the rules that much. Well, unless it's changed drastically in the new Stormcast book, where maybe they'll change the rules for everything. Which would be wild, because it would have meant that they would have had to have had all these changes in mind before the regular rulebook came out with all the new rules in it. So they would have already been changing things before their current rules were released, which is really odd. It's definitely a bit too much for Chariot. I do think if you knocked 30 points off it, what would it be competing with them? It would be the same cost as 5 Judicators, it would be the same number of points. But instead of shooting, it would be combat and it would be fast. So I think that would sound about reasonable there. If you 140 sounds okay for a Chariot. Because, let's see what else you could get for that. So as soon as you get around 200, suddenly that's where you start competing with good units. So competing with things like, I think Retributors are good, they're below 200. Competing with the Dracodian Guard, who are quite good, and the Concussors are 250, so they're a little bit more expensive. And let's see, you could get 10 Vanquishers for 220 points. So anything that's around 200 has to compete with all these things. And let's have a look. I'm going to go and add unit on the app here and see what else you can get for 200 points. So you can get Annihilators with shields. Annihilators with hammers are around 200 as well. So they're quite good, but they're not as good as they used to be at the moment. You can take, let's see, Prosecutors are 140. So 3 Prosecutors for 140. Okay, that'd be a good comparison for the Chariot. So what do the Prosecutors have over the Chariot? They have the smaller footprint, so they can drop in smaller gaps. They can be reinforced as well. Obviously, they become twice the price. You can do a 3 dice charge with them, and they're just as fast as a Chariot, if not faster. And they do good damage, decent damage on the charge. Their damage is probably comparable to a Chariot. They're way more likely to be charging than a Chariot is because they've got the 3 dice charge. So they're more likely to get the extra damage from the charge. But they're only 6 wounds instead of 10. So Prosecutors are very hot right now and Chariots are not. So a unit that just gets in, does its job, snipes something out. In combat with a 3 dice charge, you can get through screens with them since they fly as well. Then I think that's where the Chariot falls down, when you see that it's competing directly at the current point level with Prosecutors. So that's a tricky one. Still scrolling down here. So long strikes are 170, which is very cheap for what they can do, I think. So immediately, like a Chariot that's not that much cheaper than long strikes, you're thinking, why wouldn't I just have more long strikes in the list? And I would agree with you. We've got, let's see, Dracolines you can take, and Vanguard Hunters. I think both of them seem like they might be pretty good right now. A Ballista is the same price as a Chariot. Oh no, it's 30 points cheaper than the Chariot. Chariot's 170. So the Chariot's actually 30 points more than the Prosecutors. So you can understand why that's not being taken. Let's look at the Ballista and see what that does for the same price as... He's the same price as Prosecutors as well, cheaper than a Chariot. So that is D6 plus 6 shots, 4s and 2s, rend 1 damage, but anti-monster rend and crit 2 hits. So that's actually pretty good, 18-inch range. And abilities, let's see. And that's once per battle, any combat phase. And yeah, so this is interesting. So the ballista just once per battle can do d6 mortal damage to an enemy, which is pretty good, but it's only once per battle, any combat phase. Yeah, so once per battle, each ballista could do it. So actually, I saw someone putting together a list with like 10 ballistas in it, so they might be decent to try out for a few months before they disappear forever. And there's nothing on a comparative base size that they could be run as, I think, which is sad. So they'll probably come back at some point. The whole chamber will probably come back in maybe the next edition. And I've had Stormcast units that have been sitting in that cabinet unused for a decade, and then suddenly they're fashionable. Like there was one season during the last edition where Retributors suddenly became really cool for a few months because there was a certain combo that worked really well with them. So, yeah, there we go. And in terms of the Chaos forces, I was saying to my opponent that I thought the Chaos Knights would have been better in a block of 10 because they're so tough to get through and you can really bog something down with 10 of them. It's going to take a really long time to get through. With 5, I feel like they get swamped a bit. Yeah, so I think 10 of them together would have been very scary. I think the Chaos Warriors were scary, but I probably would have considered leaving them on the home objective. Because as soon as you move off it with them, you don't really have a lot of units left to defend your home with, which meant I was able to grab it and just take victory points for the rest of the game because they were stuck fighting down here. So I think a big block of them just guarding an objective like this one, which would have been very valuable to me to take this. I think that would have been very tricky to get through. Even if I multi-charge them, I'm probably not taking the objective off you that turn, because there's 20 of them. So that could be a thing. And I think there should probably be some chaff in there, perhaps, for objective grabbing and battle tactic grabbing, because we saw that there were the 5 Chaos Knights that spent a whole turn holding these woods, which isn't optimal for them, obviously. And Be'lakor. Definitely Be'lakor is an amazing choice, especially against very powerful enemy units, because he can do the whole I stop you doing anything this turn on I think it's on a 3-up, isn't it? Every time they want to do something, you roll the dice, and they probably can't do it. So Be'lakor, just really good. And what would you take out for Be'lakor? I don't know who would have to come out. Maybe you'd take out at least one of the little wizards, probably. So you're freeing up points there. The other foot heroes, they didn't really see their full potential because they were getting whomped by Yndrasta. And the Lord on Karkadrak didn't get to do anything because he just failed all his saves and got shot to death. So there are some good, cool units in there, but some would have to come out to fit in Be'lakor. So hopefully it was an informative and entertaining game for my opponent. First game of 4th edition, and for anyone who's noticing the wonderful ad-free experience in this video, that's because this game was at Warhammer World, and I like to abide by the rules, and they do have a sign up that says you may not use any footage from in our building for commercial reasons. Yep, so no adverts at all on this video for that reason, in case you're wondering why it's so smooth and interruption free. Let's see, John says, drop Lord on Kark and Sorcerers to get Be'lakor. I think that's a good straight swap. I don't know if you would also want to, because obviously you could merge the Chaos Knights together into one unit and that doesn't cost you any more. I don't know if you would consider dropping anything to have some chaff units. Some Chaos Furies, perhaps. If you took out maybe an Exalted Champion on foot. Maybe one of them drops out. How many points do you have left after bringing some Furies in then? We've got Azza in the chat. How do you find the chariot? Well, I'll give you the brief rundown of the chariot. It felt okay. It didn't feel terrible. Its damage is decent. And then I was looking at some of the other units that it competes with for that spot in the list. And I feel like it's a little bit too expensive. If it was 140... it'd be exactly the same price as the Prosecutors, and the Prosecutors are more precision but less survivable. More reliable charges, and they can get to things with their fly that the Chariot can't. So they'd be directly competing with them, they are a very strong unit right now, even if you'd take 30 points off the Chariot. If it became even a little bit cheaper than the prosecutors, I think that's the spot you would want it to drop in. So I would knock 40 points of it personally. 130. I don't think it's that amazing. It doesn't do that good of damage, especially not on the charge. When it's not on the charge, should I say. So, yeah, seems a little bit too much, but I do like the model. And there are probably some situations, certain matchups, where it would be amazing with the power through bonus. If there's, let's see, because you might do mortal wounds when you charge. You'll do reasonable damage in combat, and then if there's a few wounds left at the end on a unit and you want to power through, you're much more likely to finish them off with a chariot. So it does have some uses, but I think the prosecutors at 30 points less maybe serve more of a purpose at the moment. But that's just my opinion on playing one game with a chariot. It doesn't have terrible stats by any means, but I think the one dark horse unit for the Stormcast at the moment that people don't necessarily talk about much is the Retributors. I think they're really good for 180 points. They're around about the Annihilator price point, but you get a lot more wounds, and you get mortal damage in combat. So I'm a big fan of the Retributors right now. If I wanted to get more units that were going to get deleted, I would add more of those to my army probably, but there's no chance of that. Could always run Annihilators as Retributors though. The Purple Sun did its job quite well in this game, just reducing armor saves throughout and doing a bit of damage. The Kronspine did well for Chaos, took out some concussors and then came back to life afterwards and tied me up again. But since it was the only thing guarding the objective at the end, then I was able to take it. John says it was a great game, loved it, excellent. Hopefully you'll be playing many, many more games of Age of Sigmar soon. And Furies ordered, good to know. I think they would help a lot with this list, just for scoring battle tactics, so you're not tying up your big powerful fighting units doing peasants' work. Yeah, so Furies or Marauders or anything else that's cheap. I think you need at least a few of those units for battle tactic purposes in this edition at the moment. So, it's time to wrap this one up. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget to check out the social media shenanigans down in the description. There are more videos coming up soon. There's going to be an Old World tournament report, because I'm in the middle of the Old World tournament now. I've just played day 1, day 2 tomorrow, and then if I'm not too tired tomorrow evening, I might do the tournament report immediately. And then next week, Kings of War fans, there's Clash of Kings, the biggest Kings of War event ever. Over 200 players in Nottingham to play Kings of War, 6 games, taking the Abyssal Dwarves. So that is going to be an epic video breakdown after that. We'll see how that goes. And other than that, non-stop tournaments, non-stop battle reports, at least one a week at the moment. I'm getting lots of games in down at the club. I'll probably start cycling in an even more high variety of game systems as well. Because at the moment we're doing Age of Sigmar, Old World, Kings of War, Dead Zone. I played some Dreadball recently as well. What else? Bolt Action version 3 is about to come out, so I might try that out as well. I've got my Belgians who've been waiting. When was the last time I played that game? It can't be far off a decade now since I've played Bolt Action. I bought the 2nd edition rulebook but never actually used it. So we'll see. More games, all the time. It's total non-stop gaming. Who needs sleep when you can game and then talk about those games on live stream? I think that's fair. Okay, all that remains to be said is good night out there, whatever you are.